Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
conversations that are happening are ones that I would deem as being incredibly productive.
Changes are coming to a controversial criminal justice law.
You detach yourself from all these feelings and you just don't come back home and flip a switch and they're there.
Part 2 of our series, Permanent Punishment, looks at the unique experiences of women impacted by the criminal legal system.
Northwestern Wildcats football coach Pat Fitzgerald is here to chat about the new Ryan Field and what it means for his program.
Providers of telemedicine abortions face legal challenges following the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
The pandemic's impact on developmental delays in social-emotional learning for some children.
And Chicago expands its paid parental leave for city workers. A look at when the benefit begins and what workers will be eligible.
But first, a look at some of today's top stories. Some assistance is coming to help residents recover from a devastating explosion in the Austin neighborhood. Governor J.B. Pritzker says in a statement that a disaster declaration has been approved following the explosion and collapse of the apartment building last month. 1 man died and 7 other people were injured in that incident. The declaration means that residents can apply for low-interest loans for damages not covered by insurance. SBA officials say they'll be at the Austin Town Hall Park on Thursday to help with the applications.
Cook County prosecutors are upgrading charges against a woman accused of pushing her 3-year-old nephew into Lake Michigan. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office says it has modified the attempted murder charge filed against 34-year-old Victoria Moreno into a charge of first-degree murder following the boy's death. Moreno took her nephew, Josiah Brown, to Navy Pier last month and allegedly pushed him into the water and watched him drown. He died days later.
A leading federal judge is leaving Chicago to serve as counselor to U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. Judge Robert Dow has handled numerous major cases, including the Chicago Police Department's consent decree and the ongoing criminal case against Alderman Ed Burke. Dow will step down from his role as a judge in the Northern District of Illinois and begin his new role in December. The corruption case against Alderman Burke is set to go to trial next year. A spokesperson from the Northern District of Illinois says the court recognizes the need for continuity in case management and will take prompt steps to reassign cases as necessary.
Chicago has been voted the best big city in America by readers of Condé Nast Traveler for the 6th straight year. The magazine praised the city's world-class architecture, museums, and restaurants, as well as Chicago's vibrant brewing scene. But it saved the highest praise for city residents, writing, quote, "It's a wide and varied city, but no matter where you go, one thing is constant. Here, you'll meet some of the most pleasant people you'll find anywhere." And don't we already know it?
Those European travelers know what they're talking about. And coming up later in the program, we'll have the second part of our series, Permanent Punishment, that explores life with a criminal record.
But after the break, calls for changes to a controversial criminal justice law. Amanda Vinicky breaks it down for us. Stay right there.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois' law overhauling the criminal justice system has taken center stage in this year's elections. The law known as the Safe T Act will eliminate cash bail come January, but it still could change before then. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. All right, Amanda, what is the latest with this law that comes up in the campaign every day, it seems?
Yeah, Paris, there's a lot on voters' minds, the economy, abortion, but also concerns about crime, which means, yes, the Safety Act is one that is up there. Some of the law has already gone into effect, but the changes associated with eliminating cash bail are really stoking frustration, including from those who play a key part in the criminal justice process, state's attorneys. A handful having filed lawsuits seeking to strike the law completely. One more filed just yesterday by the state's attorney from Brown County.
All right, multiple lawsuits. Do any or all have a chance at succeeding?
Paris, I am no lawyer, but I have read the complaints, and the grievances with them have everything to do with how the law was passed to what it does. One of the law's main backers, State Representative Jahan Gordon Booth, says advocates shouldn't shy away from having those tough conversations about it.
Crime is something that has been very prevalent in a lot of communities across the state of Illinois. I myself am a crime victim. My family has seen the absolute worst of every side of this issue. And so I think that for one to think that, anybody would be a proponent of crime, it's silly and it's quite preposterous.
The reference there, Booth's stepson was murdered in 2014. Now, it is apparent that some critics may have political motivations here. Again, who can forget that election on the horizon? But some concerns are more practical in nature. Booth says she is having those talks, including meetings just today with state's attorneys.
What I would say is there's a lot of agreement, right, on changes that need to be made. The conversations that are happening are ones that I would deem as being incredibly productive. And I think that have the ability to get us to a really good place in the next couple of weeks. I'm confident of that.
So it seems universal acknowledgement here, even among Democrats, that there will be changes made to this probably in a veto session after the election. So what kind of changes will those be? Well,
Paris, actually, there have already been changes to the Safety Act because, again, this is a huge law. And in Springfield, bills that follow up on an existing law are known as trailer bills. There have been several.
Frankly, legislation which has a lot less import, a lot less consequences than a criminal law reform bill would have, is we expect to have trailer legislation. This, in fact, is the third trailer bill for the Safety Act.
That's State Senator Scott Bennett, a lawyer who's sponsor of what could be the fourth follow-up or trailer bill.
All right, so what would that one do?
That makes several significant changes. One major criticism from state's attorneys is that the Safety Act makes it too hard to keep someone detained, even if they're probably are prone to being a flight risk. Bennett's plan would make it easier for a judge to keep someone locked up for a pre-trial for that very reason. Now, the other big proposed change in his measure is that it would make the new bail system, the cashless version, take effect only for defendants arrested or detained starting January 1st. Public defense advocates are furious about that and say it would reverse the whole point of the Safety Act.
What I've said back is, well, everything's up for negotiation, but you have to tell me what the process will look like. There simply aren't enough courtrooms or defense attorneys to bring everybody out of the jail that's in the jail on January 1 and put them through the hearings that's required within 48 hours by the Pretrial Fairness Act.
Gordon Booth says given that negotiations are ongoing, she can't get into detail about what all a compromise might entail. She says changes could deal with making sure the criminal justice system is afforded the time it needs to get things right, with the realization, she says, that during criminal trials, things don't always go according to plan.
Rather it be a witness, not being able to locate a witness, not being able to get forensics back in time. I remember in my son's case, there were a number of things that I saw happen as a part of, a criminal homicide prosecution. There were things that we saw firsthand, things that we saw go wrong. And so we want to be sensitive to those things.
Amanda, when might we learn more?
Well, January will be here, yikes, before we know it. So before then, Bennett says he does wish that the legislature had dealt with some of these obstacles before it was crunch time.
Quite honestly, I would have liked to see any kind of adjustment or clarification bills be done earlier, because you then would give all those stakeholders we talked about more time to bring that into their system. But the fact is, I had a lunch meeting today with one of the chief judges in my district, and he was pretty clear that we're going to get this done. We're going to figure whatever comes out of veto session. We're professionals. We're going to figure out how to do it.
The General Assembly will be back in Springfield in November, so next month is when we can really look for details. The legislature will have 6 days of veto session to pass a trailer bill. In Paris, Gordon Booth says she, again, is confident that it is going to happen. She says it has to.
And Amanda, so there's the noise around this bill, but then there are the legitimate concerns, which many people seem to acknowledge. So we'll keep following this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now to Brandis for the latest installment in our WTTW news series, Permanent Punishment. Brandis.
In Paris, in the last 4 decades, the fastest growing population in jails and prisons across the country has been women. And researchers say their reasons for committing crimes are different and often overlooked. Research shows the majority of women in jail have high rates of victimization, including childhood sexual abuse, sexual assault, and post-traumatic stress disorder. They also report higher rates of substance abuse and mental health problems. In this second installment of our series, the ripple effects of permanent punishments when women are incarcerated.
The living room, the dining room. So you need a dining room table? Yeah.
Tamisha Brown is furniture shopping.
You see anything you like?
At 30 years old, her apartment in Aurora is the first she's ever had on her own.
Well, it's a 3-bedroom. My oldest daughter got her own room. My 2 youngest, they share a room. I got my own room. I have a living room. I have a dining room. The kitchen is real nice. It's mine, so it's real nice.
It's a big step. Finding a home for this single mom and her children has been important and complicated.
I had a hard time finding it due to I'm on parole and I have a background.
Brown spent 6 years in Illinois State Prison for armed robbery. She's been out for 2. For many people with criminal records, finding housing is a challenge.
I filled out for DeKalb housing, Marshfield Gardens, Section A. I filled out for all that, for subsidizing housing. I filled out for all that, but I always got denied.
And in Brown's case, stable housing was necessary to regain custody of her 4 children, a goal she accomplished just this summer.
Going to court, they investigated me. They wanted to see my place. I had to do a Zoom so they could see my place. I had to show them that I was working. I showed them that I had to get a parole. I had to get a paper from my parole officer also saying that I've been doing good.
Brown is one of thousands of women whose imprisonment has contributed to the 475% increase of women in prison across the country between 1980 and 2020. What's more, 58% of incarcerated women are mothers to children under 18. Psychologist and former Cook County Jail Warden Nika Jones Tapia argues the permanent punishments they face affect not only them, but their entire families.
When DCFS is involved, there are a number of things that a parent has to show that they are able to do in order to get custody of their child. As a part of that, they have to have monitored and supervised visits with the child. They have to, and that's intense scrutiny. They have to show that they can maintain stable employment, to have stable housing.
Research shows that upon release, women tend to be poorer than their male counterparts, in part because they've typically been sole caregivers of children and on limited incomes. The stigmas facing women on parole are greater than those facing men. Fewer halfway programs or shelter beds exist for women post-incarceration, and women have greater difficulty obtaining employment and housing, leaving them at greater risk for homelessness.
We look at Black women. The unemployment rate in this country in general is somewhere around 5%. For people who are incarcerated, the unemployment rate is around 27%. But for Black women, the unemployment rate is about 43%.
You're the primary caregiver of your household. You come home with the same restrictions that men have, with the added problem of having to care for a child who depends on you for housing, for food, for shelter, etc.
And some of those permanent punishments hinder efforts to be an active mother.
So it was my daughter's 8th grade graduation. I had a new principal, right? So I had to take a new background test, and I didn't mind because my kid has been in the same Catholic school since she was 3.
Celia Colon went to prison at 17 years old and already a mother. That was 26 years ago. Now, at 47, she's been out of prison for 22 years. But the shadow still follows her and her younger children.
And then the principal calls me to tell me, Miss Colon, and I'm like, yes. They're like, sad to say, but due to your violent background, you're not allowed to participate in the 8th grade festivals. You can only come and pick up a report card. You cannot volunteer at the school. And I was speechless.
Colon's daughter attended school in Hammond, Like in Illinois, schools in Indiana can determine if volunteers are subject to the same background checks as employees. Today, Cologne runs her own nonprofit called Giving Others Dreams.
So this is where the women come and get their clothes from. We do the shopping for them right now.
To help other women with shared experiences.
Why are you being judged for something that happened 26 years ago? I'm a 46-year-old mother. I don't even know what happened when I was 17. I was a harmed child. I was still processing. I was still full of trauma. Who I am today has no reflection of what happened when I was 17 and who I was at 17. Nobody is without error. Nobody is without a mistake.
That's it, Ma. That's it. Get you. Hold.
When 47-year-old Maria Garza went into prison for drug trafficking, her children were 8 and 9 years old. She's been home for just over a year. Now her children are adults, and her place as a parent isn't the same as when she left.
I mean, the first thing that you really want to do is come back and connect with your children, you know, the children that you left. It's hard because as a mother, you think that even though you've seen them grow, you still think that they're the 9, 10-year-olds that you left many years ago. And then you have these restrictions, these barriers, and you see it's not as easy to just come in and scoop everything up from where you left it.
But that's not the only difficulty she's faced. While dealing with the income inequality all women face, Garza has tried to build her credit score with a secure credit card from Capital One.
Email that basically says that due to past or pending criminal activity, they were shutting down my account.
A letter from the bank read, quote, Capital One has discovered adverse past or present legal action involving an individual associated with the account.
Those one-sided narratives where they're just looking at something without knowing me as somebody that has been paying the card off, you know, and trying to reestablish myself.
Permanent housing has been another challenge. She's leaned on family and friends for support.
Lift leg. Yes, lift leg. Good girl.
One source of income and therapy has been something Garza learned while in prison.
Yes, look.
Training service dogs like this one named Holly.
They coming all the way from Chicago. You know it's real.
What Garza, Cologne, and Brown have in common is facing the fight to move forward for their own and their children's futures, despite the permanent punishments stemming from their pasts. For each woman, support from other women who've been there has been key to getting back on their feet.
When you are independent and you've been down for so long and been through the struggle for so long, you have to find yourself. So it was like a big step for me to get my own place, have a job, have my car. Sometimes it get hard. You know what I'm saying? I don't give up because I know my kids is watching me.
Now, you heard in that piece about all of the hoops that Tamisha Brown had to jump through to regain custody of her children. The Women's Justice Institute reports that mothers are disproportionately single parents. So if they are seeking to regain custody, they would have to complete a service plan for the Department of Children and Family Services that can often include parenting classes and the like. But what we're understanding from the Women's Justice Institute is that prisons don't always offer the required programming. And of course, that can further create some trauma for those mothers who are hoping to do the work necessary to regain custody of their children. The WJI wrote a whole report on this in the spring of 2021. And of course, Paris viewers can find out more about that as well as other resources on our website, WTTW.com/news.
A lot of things mothers have to go through once they're out of incarceration. Brandis, we got 2 more stories on this week. What else can we expect?
That's right. So tomorrow night, we're going to talk about labor and employment. Obviously, something very important for anyone, whether or not you have a criminal record. But if you do have a criminal record, it is that much harder to get and maintain employment. So we're going to talk about some of the challenges there, but also some of the progress that the state might have made. And then on Thursday night, we're going to talk about what we're calling the workarounds, ways that people can get their records sort of cleared or sealed, expunged, and clemency, and whether or not folks have access to those.
All right, very important topics to bring up. Brandis, great reporting.
Pierce,
we'll look forward to that. You bet. And up next, Northwestern University looks to tackle a big project. We're one-on-one with the university's football coach on plans for a new stadium. A brand new football stadium is coming to the Chicago suburbs, and no, it's not going to be in Arlington Heights. We'll see what happens with the Bears, but plans to tear down and rebuild the almost 100-year-old Northwestern Ryan Field have been unveiled. The university says the new nearly billion-dollar stadium will hold 12,000 fewer people while setting new standards when it comes to accessibility and sustainability. But how will construction affect the Evanston community, the university, and the school's football program? And here to discuss all that and a lot more is Northwestern University head football coach Pat Fitzgerald. Coach Fitzgerald, it's great to see you. You know, you spent a lot of time on the sidelines of Ryan Field. I mean, I remember the old Ryan Field before it was renovated 20 years ago. What do you think about the new digs?
Well, it's incredibly exciting. You know, this is more than just a football stadium. You know, this is going to become, I believe, and we believe here is an amazing community asset for the city of Evanston, for our students, for our faculty, and the entire community to be in just an incredible area and venue for 365 days a year, not just 7 home football games. So just really thankful for the Ryan family, their amazing commitment and obviously generosity, and our trustees, President Schill, and now look forward to working with the great city of Evanston and the residents to make this something that's really special.
How does this impact your ability to recruit players? I mean, you're taking them in and you're telling them it might not be the biggest stadium in the country, but it's going to be the newest and the most state-of-the-art. What does that do when you're trying to get a young hotshot player into the program?
Well, it's exciting, number one. You know, it shows the commitment that we're making to build this football program into a championship contender year in and year out. But, you know, from a standpoint of maybe it doesn't always need to be 100,000. The way that it's structured, you know, the Ryan family and Derek Ragg, our great director of athletics, went out along with a lot of our administrators to look at a number of stadiums. And the new Ryan Field is going to be modeled after the old Chicago Stadium, where it's going to be very intimate. There'll be a canopy over the top to protect our fans from the weather. But more importantly, frankly, is the football coach trap the sound in and give us the first time we'll ever have a home field advantage in the history of Northwestern football. So that's incredibly exciting to me. And from a recruiting standpoint, it's more about what happens in the building, the atmosphere, the environment, than it is necessarily about the size. I've been in a 100,000 seat stadium, and it's not been the loudest venue that I've ever played in. So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been in the big house before where you can kind of hear a pin drop sometimes. So next year is the last planned year at the current Ryan Field, and then you're going to have 2 years where you're going to need a temporary home. Might you want to roam the sidelines at Soldier Field?
You know, I'm going to let that be those decisions be made by Derek Ragg and our administration at the university. There'll be a lot of conversations, you know, between now and that point on, you know, what's best for, you know, our student athletes, what's best for the program, what's best for our community and our fans, and then, you know, what's actually feasible. And so we've played a number of games at Wrigley Field. You know, I'm obviously very open to that. Also, as you know, from Orland Park and a pretty big White Sox fan, so I'm open to that. And you know, they're playing baseball there in September and October, so you know, November discussions potentially there. But you know, I'm looking to have this be a unique experience for our players and our fans. And so let's not look at these 2 years that will be under construction as a negative. Let's find a way to make it a unique positive, maybe a unique experience. You know, similar to, you know, we're not going to go play all of our games in Dublin, Ireland, but let's do some creative things to make it be a really unique experience for our fans and especially for our players.
So maybe you could switch off north side, south side, depending on what team is away that weekend. Do you expect any hurdles from the Evanston community? I mean, obviously they put up with Ryan Field for 100 years, but with added events like concerts, you think residents might say, hey, let's put the brakes on?
Well, I think there's a lot of, you know, we're in the preliminary stages here. We wanted to obviously get out and listen to, you know, residents in Evanston. We've had multiple listening opportunities and engagement, and then that's going to continue here as we work through this project. And I know the university, the athletic department, our program, our trustees, we want to be great community partners, and that's going to be the focus of this project is, you know, how can we listen to the concerns, how can we improve those concerns and make everybody just really proud and excited for a community venue that, yeah, it's going to be for 7 home football games and hopefully, you know, lacrosse and lacrosse championships. And you know, I'm a macro level guy. You know, Evanston High School, you know, Illinois high school playoffs, the Illinois high school football state championships. There's some really unique opportunities here to drive revenue, for the community, to really bring people here to Evanston more than just the 7 days. But this is going to be a process, right? This just got schematically approved by our trustees, and now there'll be just a ton of opportunity for our administrators to sit down and work with our community residents, and then the city of Evanston, to make this be a win for everybody.
And this is coming at a time of big change for the Big Ten. You've got USC and UCLA, two massive programs coming in a couple of years. How do you think that expansion of the Big Ten into like a national conference now is going to affect your program specifically? Because you're already going up against these massive programs, Michigan, Penn State. Now you're adding these other legacy programs.
I love it. It's awesome. It's great for our fans. It's incredible for our student athletes as they want to get out and compete in the highest stage, and there'll be no bigger stage than the Big Ten. I already feel that's the way that it is. And, we've been to 10 bowl games here during my time, Big Ten West championships. We believe we can compete at a championship level our way, the way that we believe in doing things here as a university first, and then athletic department and our program third, and that's recruiting world-class student athletes and developing them for the next 40 or 50 years through our great game and being on this world-class campus and this world-class education. So, adding those two teams in the West, I think just adds more opportunity for our brand to get more national, for our players to showcase their talents at a higher and higher level. Who knows? Maybe we bring UCLA or USC in here for the first new game in the new Ryan Field. That would be pretty neat. That would be a great way to kick off, the expansion.
And get the program exposed in the LA market. And of course, the Northwestern's done an amazing job, like you said, going to 10 bowl games. Basically starting in '95, your year as linebacker when you went to the Rose Bowl, and since then, you've competed with these giant programs really well. It's been a slow start to this year, although you are 1-1 in conference play. And if you look at the Big Ten West, it does look pretty wide open. Do you have confidence that the team could turn it around and maybe make a run? Because it doesn't look like anyone's going to run away, at least at this point, with the division.
Yeah, I have great confidence, Paris. You watched the way that we played last week. Again, we had some self-inflicted wounds, but we went into the Lions' Den, so to speak, in Beaver Stadium, and took the number now 10 team in the country right all the way down to the wire. And I've just got to work hard to get these guys to play cleaner and play more complementary football. But there's a ton of will and grit in this squad, and you're preaching to the choir here. We're all kind of 1-1. I know Nebraska's 0-2, but who wants it? Who wants to improve? Who wants to get better? And who's going to go out there and make the plays that need to happen in those 60 minutes can win the West. And a few years ago, unfortunately, we started the same way, and we ended up getting to Indianapolis to compete for the Big Ten championship. So I know we're not where we want to be as far as a record, but the things that we can control and fix, we're working diligently to do. And what a great opportunity here for homecoming this weekend against a Wisconsin team that, we've always had tough, hard-fought battles against. And, it'll be great to get back home after a tough road test.
All right, you got me all riled up now. I know that the Wisconsin program's going through some tough times right now, so it'll be an interesting matchup. Coach Fitzgerald, best of luck and congratulations. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ferris. Appreciate it. Go Cats.
Still to come on Chicago tonight, access to abortion through telemedicine, how patients are navigating the system after some states change their laws. The importance of social emotional learning and development in children and how the pandemic has contributed to some delays. Plus, city employees will soon enjoy more paid time off when expanding their families. A look at Chicago's new policy. But first, some more of today's top stories. State lawmaker LaShawn Ford and the mayor and police chief of Forest Park are looking at efforts to prevent crime and drug overdoses on the CTA. Ford says problems with addiction, homelessness, and mental illness in Chicago are impacting neighboring communities.
The problems that we see in Chicago is spilling over to a beautiful community like Forest Park, and they don't have the resources to deal with it. This stop right here is a place where they have identified fatal overdose from heroin, fentanyl deaths. They have people that are homeless. They are not residents of this community. They are residents of Chicago.
The Bronzeville Historical Society and the Comptroller's Office are celebrating their combined efforts to save records of the black experience in Illinois. Many African Americans traveled to Illinois to escape Jim Crow segregation and discrimination in the South. One way to document that history is through funeral records.
This was a years-long effort in which my staff had to go to the closed funeral home on the South Side, obtain court orders to save the records, pry wooden boards off of doors, and retrieve in bankers' boxes pieces of history that would otherwise have been forever lost before the building was razed.
Art created by young people in the custody of the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice is going on display at a Chicago art gallery. The exhibition, titled Can You See Me?, opens at the Weinberg Newton Gallery on October 14th. The artwork originated in art therapy sessions for youth in custody and was run by South Chicago-based Sky Art. The exhibition will be on display until December. And now to Brandis and how some are navigating access to abortion in a post-Dobbs landscape. Brandis.
Paris, the pandemic has meant many people are able to access a doctor's office through a computer screen instead of in person. Now, this includes people seeking telemedicine abortions. However, after the Dobbs Supreme Court decision, the legality of the practice in some states isn't as clear for providers and patients. So joining us now are Dr. Katie McHugh, an Indiana-based OBGYN and abortion provider, Bridget Leahy, Vice President of Public Policy at Planned Parenthood of Illinois, and Katie Watson, Associate Professor of Medical Education, Medical Social Sciences, Obstetrics and Gynecology at Northwestern University. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Dr. McHugh, let's start with you, please. Briefly explain for us how a telemedicine abortion works.
Telemedicine abortion is a very simple procedure. The patient doesn't need to be in the health center to have an abortion in this way because medications can be mailed to them. The health screening can be done virtually. I am at my home in Indiana right now, and in the same way I'm coming to your studio over virtual, the same way we can bring care to patients virtually. So a provider will screen the patient to make sure that they are healthy and an appropriate candidate for a medication abortion, make sure that they understand all of the steps and how to contact us if we can offer any additional help or if they need extra care, and then we can mail them their medication.
And you can mail that medication, of course, to the patient in a state where abortion is still legal.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm in Indiana where that is not the case, and it has not been the case for a very long time to be able to do telemedication abortion. So in my case, I would have to leave my home state of Indiana to be able to provide telemedicine abortion services because of the legal restrictions around that in my state.
Okay. So Katie Watson, describe for us, if you would, the legal landscape for providers like Dr. McHugh.
Well, it's complex. Telemedicine is, and the practice of medicine generally is regulated on a state-by-state basis. And as we saw during the pandemic, it's been a boon in many areas of medicine, particularly for folks in rural areas and across medical specialties. Medication abortion was approved by the FDA in 2000, yet it was very deliberately excluded from this trend of increased access in many states, just as part of their package of anti-abortion legislation. It's safe for telemedicine, but it was restricted in those states. Now that those states can outright ban abortion, it does increase the obstacles to the legality. So for example, Illinois is a standard of care state. Our physicians are allowed to provide the reproductive care that is approved by medical societies as necessary and essential to women's health care. However, they cannot treat patients in other states that they are not licensed in or that ban that particular procedure or treatment or medication. So a patient from a state like Indiana would have to drive across the Illinois border to be physically in Illinois in order to be cared for by an Illinois physician. However, that can still happen with telemedicine. And so I just want to point out, telemedicine abortion provides increased access for people in Illinois and states like it that provide standard of care who don't have to drive hours to a clinic or interrupt their busy day further than necessary. But it also could be helpful to those who are driving long distances to get to states like ours, but don't have to make it all the way to a clinic. And then lastly, this is different than telemedicine, but it's very important to name the option of self-managed abortion, where people in states where abortion is banned may choose to use the instruments of the internet or phone calls or information or mail pharmacies, but international pharmacies that would mail them the medications, where they would do the same medication procedure throughout the first trimester, but without being in partnership with a doctor who is their doctor.
And so I want to get Bridget in here. Bridget, has there been an uptick for Planned Parenthood of Illinois doctors and providers performing telehealth abortions in a post-Dobbs world?
So definitely in Illinois, we have seen an increase overall in abortion patients. The ramifications of abortion bans in states surrounding Illinois and every state south of us has resulted in an increased need for procedures as well as medication abortion. And telehealth is an option that really can help someone get care they need. We have had patients cross the border, drive from their own state, and be in a parking lot right across the border to do their telehealth visit because that's the only way that they can get the care they need. I also would like to stress what Katie said just a moment ago, which is that telehealth is critically important for people within the state of Illinois. We are a very large state, a very long state, and for some patients, prior to being able to get abortion pills mailed to them, they were having to drive hundreds of miles to get care. Even if they could do the appointment online, they were still having to drive to a health center to pick up the medication. Now we can do the telehealth visit as well as mail the pills to an Illinois address. And that is significant for patients who are coming to Illinois as well as people who are already living in our state.
Dr. McHugh, to that point, what is the impact on patients of all of this?
It is significant. So we keep using that word significant, and there is nothing insignificant about the Dobbs decision for your state or for mine. My experience with patients has been that before the Indiana ban went into effect, I was also seeing patients from Ohio and Kentucky and Tennessee and Alabama and all kinds of other states that had already implemented a ban. During the 1 week that Indiana had a ban, I was turning patients away and sending them to Illinois for this very normal and common health care. Now that the ban has been enjoined in Indiana, we're trying to ramp back up our services so that we can help with that patient burden of having to go out of state or send everyone slightly to the west of Indiana. But it is difficult because even in that 1 week, people lost their jobs, we sent away so many patients, and now it's difficult to ramp back up. So the impact on patients is massive because not only are we confusing them about what is legal, what is available and accessible in their communities, but we're also making this just more stigmatized, more difficult to access. So all of this contributes to an immense amount of harm done by the states to its citizens.
And Bridget, we're almost out of time. We've got about 30 seconds left. But, you know, with so many people needing abortion care in Illinois, coming from out of the state, of course, does the telehealth option sort of alleviate some of the stress on the healthcare system here at all?
Yes, it does, because you can do the appointment at a more convenient time for the patient. And then even though they may have to come to Illinois to get the medication, they can cross the border, do their appointment, and then drive and have more flexibility of when they can drive to pick it up, right? So it really is important and helpful. One of the things that we're doing is some of the providers that have been in other states providing this care are now coming over to Illinois. We have some health centers very close to the border, and they are doing telehealth visits now in Illinois. We're doing that. Planned Parenthood Wisconsin, we have a partnership with to do that.
Sounds like a lot of people having to make a trip. Then we'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Dr. Katie McHugh, Bridget Leahy, and Katie Watson for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now to Paris for a look at how the pandemic has affected social emotional learning for children. Paris.
Brandis, multiple studies have found students taking a big hit in average math and reading scores after months to years of shutdowns and distance learning. But it's not just the educational basics that may have suffered. There are growing concerns about how COVID has affected children's social emotional development and well-being as students, parents, and teachers have navigated the return to in-person learning. And joining us are Dr. Hannah Chow Johnson, a pediatrician and medical director of Loyola Medicine at North Riverside, and Justina Schlund, senior director of content and field learning at the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Welcome, both of you, here to Chicago tonight. Justina, I'll start with you. First of all, describe or define what social emotional learning is for us.
Sure. Thanks, Paris. So social emotional learning really simply is about developing skills that help us navigate all of the parts of our lives. So these are skills like understanding our emotions and staying motivated toward our goals, and also skills like how do we understand different perspectives and how do we work together to solve problems. And in schools, I'll just say that the term is often used to describe different types of educational strategies that are really focused on helping students develop these skills and also creating the types of environment where students feel valued and engaged and safe so they can focus on learning.
And Dr. Chow Johnson, what kind of hit have children's social and emotional well-being, what kind of hit has it taken due to the shutdowns and due to COVID?
We have seen far more children coming in being extremely anxious and also having feelings of depression. And this has been more than we'd ever seen at any point in our careers. I've been a practicing pediatrician for 25 years, and before we would always see children with depression and anxiety, but not at the levels as it's been in the pandemic.
What do you attribute that to? Lack of socialization or just the general level of angst in the country?
I think it's, and also that, and also just being more isolated. There's just less time to be, you just didn't have an opportunity to be around your classmates and be able to talk to them on a day-to-day basis. And also there's just this lack of just socialization in general. Even the shy kids have a lot to benefit from when they're in the school setting, but when they're not in the school setting, then even they suffer quite a bit from lack of socialization.
Absolutely. And Justina Schlund, we mentioned the drop in reading and math scores. So how do these problems with social emotional well-being impact those basic bread and butter academic scores?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's really broad recognition right now that academic, social, and emotional learning is all really connected. They go hand in hand together. The way that kids learn, the way that they engage with academic content has everything to do with their emotional state, with their social interactions, with how they use these types of skills to either ask for help or work through frustrations. And in fact, there's hundreds of studies out there that show that social and emotional learning can help with academic achievement. So I think right now, as we're having all of these conversations about academic learning, we have to be having them simultaneously with these conversations about social and emotional learning.
All right, Justina, what does social and emotional learning look like in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, it can look a lot of different ways, and we really encourage schools and families and communities to work together to figure out the right approach for them. But in general, it involves a few different things. Number one, there's usually really intentional time for building positive relationships among students and adults. So it might look like a daily check-in or a morning meeting where they're talking about their feelings. It also includes time for explicitly teaching these social and emotional skills, using an evidence-based program that's really developmentally appropriate for their needs. And lastly, it's about integrating these types of teaching strategies that focus on reflection and collaborative problem solving to really encourage students to practice these social and emotional skills throughout academic learning as well.
Dr. Chow Johnson, what are the warning signs that parents and teachers should be on the lookout for? Because, you know, anxiety, depression, it's not always easily detectable at first.
Mm-hmm. It could be something just very subtle, such as maybe just being a little quieter, which is a little hard when you're in a classroom full of other children. It could also just be a change, a shift in, maybe it just might be a small change in the grades from maybe going down from an A to a B. It could also just be just a little bit lack of interest in going into maybe being in the activities that they were prior interested in. So most children don't actually say, I'm outright depressed or I'm anxious, but they will often say things like, I just don't maybe my appetite isn't very good, I'm not sleeping very well, I just don't know what it is, but I'm just not enjoying school as much.
We mentioned everyone is trying to navigate the return to in-person learning, which has gone on for a year or more. So what are the best ways schools can address these issues with their students?
I think one of the best ways the school can address this is just really to acknowledge the fact that, you know, we have been through a pretty hard time. This is unusual. We've had 2 years of pandemic, and a lot of that time the children were not in the classroom. And as a result of that, I think most schools are doing a really good job of recognizing that they just need to be aware of of the students. They just need to be a little bit more patient and just to be a little bit more attuned to their students' moods and just the way they are behaving on a day-to-day basis.
And Justina Schlund, are there different signs to look for when we're talking about, let's say, a kindergartner versus middle schooler or high school in terms of social and emotional problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, students at different ages are definitely expressing themselves very differently. So while a younger student is thinking about how do I talk about my emotions? How do I really start to name some of these feelings and cope with them? Older students really have more complex feelings that they're dealing with right now. And, you know, one of the things we've heard a lot from older students is that they want time in schools to really focus on developing friendships. Many of them are saying that they feel a little bit disconnected after the pandemic and they want to reestablish friendships, but they want strategies for building these social skills in school. So I think it's really important to think about these different needs from both basic emotion identification and management to how am I helping them develop these relationships and friendships that help them in the long term.
Such an important part of being in school. Dr. Tal Johnson, we mentioned the loss in reading and test scores and the issues here with social and emotional learning. How long might this impact students for years to come? I mean, how deep is this pandemic loss and how long is it going to last?
Right. That is a question. That's an excellent question, and that it may be several years, and it might be a little hard to predict exactly how long, but we can already see even just what a short period of time, a month, can impact the life of a child. And with children, you know, when we're talking about ages 0 to 18, 2 years is quite a lot of time out of their lives.
And a crucial 2 years.
Crucial 2 years, especially the children who were born during the pandemic.
Very interesting. All right, a lot to think about for parents and teachers and health professionals like yourselves. And our thanks to Dr. Hannah Chow Johnson and Justina Schlund. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And up next, Chicago expands its paid parental leave for city workers. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Workers for the city of Chicago who plan to become parents will now have much more time off to spend with their new child. As of January 1st, any city employee who's worked for at least 1 year for the city will receive 12 weeks of paid parental time off. In a country that has 0 guaranteed paid parental leave, Chicago is one of a handful of major cities expanding this benefit. Here to talk about it are Darcy Flynn, Director of Gender-Based Violence Strategy and Policy for the City of Chicago, and Sharmili Majmudar, Executive Vice President of Policy and Organizational Impact with Women Employed. And welcome back to both of you. Thanks for joining us. So we know previously the city offered 4 to 6 weeks for birthing parents and 2 weeks for non-birthing parents. Darcy Flynn, why is the City of Chicago expanding it now?
Sure. So we, like many of you, have watched the COVID-19 pandemic shine a spotlight on flaws within our labor market that really highlighted the gender and racial inequities. When we saw the care infrastructure crumble, we saw women leave the workforce in droves. And we ourselves as city government, as one of the largest employers in the city, we're not immune from that trend. We only have about 30% females in our workforce. And so this policy aligns with the mayor's work to create good quality jobs and address these inequities in our labor market. And so now is the time, particularly when women's bodily autonomy is under attack nationally. It is a time for us to walk the walk and provide this critical benefit to our employees.
And Darcy, just for quick clarity, who benefits, what parents, which birthing and non-birthing parents benefit from this new policy?
Sure. So all birthing and non-birthing parents are eligible for up to 12 weeks paid parental leave under this new policy. And that includes parents who are having a child through foster care, adoption, and even covers those acting as a surrogate for up to 8 weeks of paid leave with additional time available if there end up being any sort of medical complications, that surrogate needs more time off.
Sharmili Majmudar, what's the benefit of paid time off?
What isn't the benefit? Paid time off, paid leave of this kind, and we really applaud what the city is doing here, has huge dividends for employers, for individual parents, for children, and for our communities. We know that paid leave reduces things like infant mortality, which is a significant issue in the United States and in Chicago and Illinois. It reduces low birth weight, for example, increases breastfeeding. It can reduce postpartum depression. So there are real health benefits, health and well-being benefits. But then also it really allows for women and parents to stay connected to the workforce. So the Illinois Institute of Economic Policy, as well as the Project for Middle Class Renewal, did a study that showed that access to paid leave increased the probability that a working mother would remain employed by 10% and reduced her likelihood of experiencing a loss of income by 14%. And we see that pretty consistently across the board. In addition, the United States is the only developed nation that does not provide paid leave for its citizens. So in many ways, what the city is doing is actually catching up and getting to parity around what we see around the world.
And to that point, as you said, the U.S. has no paid parental leave, just one of 6 worldwide that do not offer this kind of parental leave, according to the American Psychological Association. So here is how we compare. The UK offers 39 weeks of paid time off, Sweden offering 68, Estonia 82 weeks, and Japan offering 52 weeks or more. Sharmili, back to you. Why isn't this something that the U.S. is already doing?
I think that there's been really some myths out there about what the costs actually are of paid leave. And I think there's not enough understanding of what the societal benefits are of paid leave. We really, as I already mentioned, we really do have a lot of ways in which our society would benefit. And, we look at other municipalities and New York City employees get 12 weeks of family pay. Los Angeles City employees get 6 weeks. There are municipalities across the country that do provide paid leave. And there are 11 states plus the District of Columbia that do it. The problem is that this is very patchwork. And it doesn't really allow for small businesses to compete because this is all treated as though it's an incentive or a benefit as opposed to a right. And that's actually why Women Employed is advocating for paid family medical leave at a statewide level and federal.
Well, and Darcy, then, that leaves out the private sector. What responsibility does the private sector have in implementing more parental leave? Because as Sharmili mentioned, small businesses, it would be hard for them to do.
Yeah, and Mayor Lightfoot certainly calls on her colleagues across the country, as well as in the private sector, to join her in offering this benefit. The cost-benefit analysis is clear. The benefits far outweigh the cost. Even from a business perspective, you will recruit and retain more employees and diversify your workforce overnight by providing this benefit. And so the mayor is walking the walk here, and the rest of the country is not doing this, to your point, Brandis. And in many ways, these benefits or lack thereof are your values statement, and the mayor is doubling down on her values of gender and racial equity and understands that this benefit achieves that goal, and without it, in fact, we will not achieve that goal of right-sizing our labor market.
And Darcy, we've got, just about 30 seconds left, but what is the impact of not having paid leave? What does that mean for families when they bring home a new baby or a new child?
Yeah, I mean, our old policy, you said it was between 4 to 6 weeks. You're not cleared to do things like exercise until 6 weeks, and that's assuming you didn't have any medical conditions or complications. It means you're choosing between the well-being of your child and your family and a paycheck. And this benefit and this new policy that the mayor has initiated is removing that choice. You can have time with your baby or your new child and you will get your paycheck. There's no more choice in that decision.
January 1st for city employees is when that kicks in. We'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Darcy Flynn and Sharmili Majmudar for joining us.
Thank you.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. What's the mayor's proposed budget going to mean for your wallet? Our Spotlight Politics team on that and more.
And he started the Chicago Film Fest back in 1965. Now, with a new memoir, Michael Kutza tells us about his life among the stars. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of its partners named Illinois Leading Lawyers by the Law Bulletin Publishing Company of Chicago.